Hi, I'm Glenn Rogers, and this is Biblical Insights. The title of our video today is Whose Side Are You On? This is section 44 of our study of Jesus' life and ministry based on the Gospel of Mark. The text we're going to look at today is Mark chapter 9, verses 33 through 41. Now, the text talks about two or three different things, and so we'll mention those, but what we really want to focus on here is what he says down there near the end of that section, and that's where I drew the title from, Whose Side Are You On? So we're going to read the text, and as always, we'll be reading from the Simplified New Testament, which is my translation of the New Testament. So if you're reading along in your own translation, yours may sound a little bit different. But essentially, if you look closely, you'll see that they say pretty much the same thing. So let's begin with verse 33 of Mark chapter 9. After arriving at Capernaum, Jesus asked his followers, "What were you arguing about on the road?" They did not want to answer because they did not want to tell him they had been arguing about who was the greatest. Jesus called the 12 together and sat down with them. He said, "If you want to be first, you must be the very last. You must learn to be a servant." Then Jesus called one of the children to come over, and he picked him up and held him in his arms. "Whoever welcomes one of my childlike believers welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the Father who sent me." John said to Jesus, "Teacher, we saw a man driving out demons in your name, but because he was not one of us, we told him to stop." "Do not stop him or others like him," Jesus said. "No one who is working miracles in my name is going to quickly turn against me. Besides, those who are not against us are for us. In fact, anyone who gives you a drink of water in my name because you belong to me will certainly not be turned away from heaven on that last great day." Now, it may seem at first to some people that there's nothing here of very great importance. This is just Jesus talking to his disciples about a number of different things. But I think that would be a mistake. I think there are some things here that are extremely important, and we need to think about them. The first is that the disciples were arguing among themselves. They were walking, and it may have been a large group of people, not necessarily just the 13 people, Jesus and his 12 apostles, but obviously a much larger group of people. And the disciples were having a discussion, and Jesus probably knew exactly what they were arguing about, but he asked them, and they didn't want to tell him, because I think on one level they understood they were moving in the wrong direction. They were arguing about something they shouldn't have cared about. And Jesus knew, and he said, "Look, whoever is going to be the most important," that's what he means by whoever wants to be first. Whoever's going to be the most important. Whoever's going to be the greatest. Whoever's going to be the leader. Whoever's going to be in charge. Okay, whoever's going to be the number one guy, he has to learn to be last. What does that mean? Well, he was talking about not putting yourself out as a leader, but being satisfied to be a servant, helping other people. The way you get to be, important for everybody is to take care of everybody's needs. You see, that's what makes you really important, is to be taking care of problems and challenges and helping people with things. That's and then pretty soon people begin to see how important you are, and you become a leader, not because you said, "I'm going to be the leader," but because you said, "How can I help you? What can I do for you?" You see? And so he was teaching them a very important idea or concept about leadership. Don't put yourself out there and say, "I'm going to be the leader." Instead, ask, What can I do to help you? You see, that's what he needed them to understand. And then he called one of the children over to him. Now, this is one of the ways we know that it wasn't just Jesus and his 12 apostles, that there was a very large group of people who traveled about with him, because there were children in the group, and that which meant there were also wives and mothers, and it was a large group of people who, when they could, left home and traveled about with Jesus from place to place. And Jesus calls one of the children over and picks him up and sets him down on his knee and tells them, you need to be childlike. Now, what I think we need to focus on here is that there's a difference between childlike and childish. Jesus wasn't saying be childish. You see, childish is the bad stuff about kids, the selfishness, the whininess, the crybaby, the temper tantrums, the I want this and I want that and put me first and blah, blah, blah. You know how children are. Children are children. Okay? He wasn't saying be childish. He was saying be childlike. What's the difference? Well, to be childlike is to be trusting, to be willing to acknowledge your need for help, to be willing to say, I can't do this, will you help me? You see, to trust the one who's helping you, to ask questions. Sometimes as parents, we get so tired of our children asking us questions. But that's how they learn. That's how they understand. That's how they begin to make sense of the world, you see. And they ask why all the time, right? Just about every child out there goes through a stage where they ask why. Don't do that. Why? Do this. Why? You see, what everything is why. Why that instead of something else? Why this instead of something else? Why? I don't understand. Why this? Why that? Why not? What? And they're trying to understand, so they ask questions, and which in and of itself is an acknowledgement that they don't understand. They want to understand, but they don't, and they need help, so they're willing to ask. And most children are willing, to a degree at least, to be led and to be cared for and to be taught and to be helped. And they're very loving. You see, that's all the good stuff about children. And that's what Jesus means when he says be childlike. And then he said something very strange, that those who will help my childlike followers are going to be rewarded by God. Even if they just give you a cup of cold water to drink, they're not going to lose their reward. That's a very bold statement. He's setting up this idea that those who help the kingdom and those who participate in the kingdom and those who are doing kingdom business, that they're going to be acknowledged and rewarded by God. And this brings up something from John. He remembers something. Oh, teacher, by the way, the other day, and this helps us understand that they weren't always with Jesus. There were times when Jesus was off doing something and he sent his disciples to go do something else. And so John says, the other day, we saw a man driving out demons in your name, but because he wasn't one of us, we told him to stop. And Jesus says, no, don't do that. Don't tell him to stop. Because if he's doing something in my name, he's Jesus says, not going to turn against me very quickly, meaning he's one of my people. That's how he's able to do these things in my name. He's one of mine. See, and John thought, yeah, but if he's not one of us, if he's not one of the 12, if he's not traveling with us and learning from, you, the master, Jesus, then he isn't one of us and he shouldn't be doing that. And Jesus said, no, that's not true. That's not correct. What does that mean? What do we make of that? Well, what it says to me is that people can be with Jesus without being part of our specific group. You know, Christianity is broken up into so many different segments. You know, you have the Catholic Christianity, and then that's broken up into Catholic, Roman Catholic, and then Orthodox, and then you have the Protestant branch of Christianity, and within that there are dozens of different fellowships or denominations, and just because, and the tendency typically is to say, well, yeah, but we're the ones who have it right, we're the ones who understand, and we got it right, and if you're not one of us, then you're not one of us. You know, we're with Jesus, and Jesus is with us, and if you're not with us, then you're not one of us. You see, it causes all sorts of divisions and separations, and of course that's not what Jesus wanted. He wanted his church to be unified. That's why he prayed about that in John 17, on the night before he was betrayed. He wanted unity. He didn't want divisions and factions and fighting and arguing who's the biggest, who's the best, who's most important, who's right. You know, that's not what he wanted. He wanted people who believed in him to be united in their faith and in their efforts against Satan. See, that man was driving out demons, and John tried to stop him. So don't do that. You're not one of us. You can't do that. And Jesus saying, wait a minute. That guy's on my side. He's on our side. Don't stop him. So that brings up the question, whose side are you on? That's why I named that title, or this video with that title. Whose side are you on? And when we stop and think about it, we realize that there are only two sides. There are only two sides. You're either on God's side or you're on Satan's side. That's it. It's the only two options. You're either with God or you're with Satan. Now, a lot of people don't like to hear that, you see, and you know, they get all very upset. Well, who are you to decide who's on what side? I'm not deciding who's on which side. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying there's only two sides, okay? Either God's or Satan's. Those are the only two possibilities. And somebody said, well, what about somebody who's not on either side? They're not. Okay. By deciding not to decide, you made a choice. And your choice is to be not with God. See, it's just that simple. You have to decide. Every human being has free will. Every human being is self-determined. And you choose who and what you're going to be. God doesn't make you do anything or keep you from doing anything. You do as you please. That's the way he created human beings and spiritual beings. And many choose to turn away from God. And when you turn away from God, where do you go? Well, the only option left is over to Satan's side. There is no in between. There is no middle ground. There is no not with Satan, but also not with God. I'm not with anybody. I'm just by myself. I just do my own thing. No, there's no such thing. If you decide not with God, then you have in fact decided to be with Satan, because there are only two possibilities, good or evil, righteousness or wickedness. Now, some people will say, well, I'm not a wicked person. I don't do bad things. I've never been arrested. I'm not a criminal. I'm not a cheater, a liar. I don't sell drugs to children. I don't rob banks. I don't kill people. I'm not an evil person. Well, okay, just because you don't engage in those sorts of activities doesn't mean that you're not on Satan's side. Because all Satan wants is you to be separated from God. All Satan wants is for you to be not for God. And if you're not for God, then you're for Satan. It's just that simple. That's all there is. So, whose side are you on? I hope it's God's side. I hope you've decided to be with God. How do you do that? Well, you acknowledge God's existence and presence. You acknowledge his standards of rightness and justice. You acknowledge that you haven't always met those and that you're a sinful person. You go to God and you ask for forgiveness, and you find a group of people who are Christians and who are willing to baptize you, to immerse you in water for the forgiveness of sins. And when you do that, God will forgive you, and he will add you to the church, the group of saved people. And you will have hope for the future. You see? It's not hard to choose God and to become a Christian. It's not hard. But you have to make a choice. And I hope you make the right choice. So, whose side are you on? Many people who became Christians a long time ago just assume that I'm on God's side. Yeah, but are you really? Are you really? Do you have a vital and powerful relationship with God? Or do you just go through the motions and go to church on Sunday, and then the rest of the week, you don't really think much about God or Jesus or right or wrong? You're not really helping anybody. You're not doing much of anything. There are a lot of people, I think, who consider themselves Christians on God's side, and on the day of judgment might be very disappointed and very surprised. Doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. You have to love God and try to be the person he wants you to be, and let him help you with that. And then you have hope for the future. Well, as you think about these things, and I hope you will continue to think about them over the coming days, I would encourage you, as I always do, read your Bible, pray, go to church, and may God bless.